It had been 7 years since Lorelai Bennett had spoken his name aloud. Even thinking of it summoned a pressure in her chest she'd long trained herself to ignore. In Maplewick, Vermont, a town where everyone kept to themselves and the only drama involved weather forecasts or bake sale rivalries, Lorelai had carved out a peaceful, if solitary life. She ran the Winter Hollow, a quaint bookshop with a loyal trickle of patrons and a calico cat named Whitman, who had a habit of judging everyone who walked in. No one in Maplewick knew what had happened to Lorelai back in Atlanta, not about the wedding dress she never wore, the flowers that wilted in the church pews, or the groom who simply vanished. She had crafted her reinvention carefully, a woman of books, routines, and guarded smiles. The past stayed locked in a box under her bed, alongside an untouched envelope marked Wyatt Granger, returned to sender, until the knock. It came just after midnight, during one of those early spring storms that sounded like the sky was tearing in half. The shop was closed, and Lorelai was curled in a blanket rereading Rebecca when Whitman darted to the door with a low, warning growl. She paused. The knock came again, firm, measured. Lorelai opened the door, and time folded in on itself. There, soaked from head to toe, stood Wyatt Granger. Older, hollowed. His once golden confidence replaced with a wiry desperation. His suit jacket clung to him like it had once belonged to a different man. His eyes, those traitorous, stormy eyes, locked onto hers. "Lorelai," he breathed, "they know where you are." She didn't speak, didn't move. Her fingers clenched the door frame so tightly her knuckles whitened. She wondered if she was dreaming or dying. "What the hell are you doing here?" she managed. Wyatt stepped back slightly. "I didn't come to hurt you, I swear. I wouldn't be here if it weren't." 7 years, Lorelai snapped, stepping outside despite the rain. 7 years, and not a damn word. Not a call, not an obituary, just gone. You humiliated me, you broke me, you don't get to stand here like this matters now. "I didn't have a choice," Wyatt said. Make it a sentence this time, Wyatt. No riddles, no whispers, one honest sentence." Wyatt looked over his shoulder, scanning the street, his jaw tightening. "They've found you. I was trying to keep them away," she blinked. "Who?" Wyatt hesitated, then pulled something from his coat, an old, crumpled photo. It was of Lorelai, standing outside her shop from 2 weeks ago. "This is how I knew," he whispered. "They're watching you now." Lorelai stared at the image, stunned. The angle was high, like it had been taken from a rooftop. A chill settled in her spine. Wyatt continued, "I made a mistake back then. I thought if I disappeared they'd forget about you, that I could draw them away. But I was wrong. And who exactly is they?" Wyatt opened his mouth, hesitated, then said one name. "Rowena Maddox." The name meant nothing to Lorelai. Not yet, but the way he said it, with fear, guilt, and reverence all tangled together, made her stomach knot. "She's not just a woman," he said. "She's part of something called the Ashridge Directive. And I was stupid enough to get involved with her." Lorelai shook her head slowly, backing toward the door. "No, you don't get to rewrite history. You didn't leave to protect me. You left because you were a coward who cheated and ran." Wyatt didn't argue. "You're right, I was a coward. I was everything you think I was, but that doesn't change the fact that you're in danger now." Lorelai stepped inside and slammed the door. She locked it, then bolted it, then set the chain. Whitman meowed angrily at the sudden noise. Outside, Wyatt didn't knock again. But he didn't leave either. She watched through the peephole as he stood there for several minutes, looking around, flinching at shadows, before disappearing into the rain. It wasn't until morning that she noticed the business card slipped under her door. On the back, written in Wyatt's familiar looping scrawl, was a message that chilled her to the bone. "If Rowena finds you before I explain everything, don't trust anything she says. I never stopped protecting you." On the front, the card bore the logo of an organization she'd never heard of, an abstract black tree with roots curling downward like claws. Below it, a name etched in silver, the Ashridge Directive. Lorelai didn't sleep that night. For the first time in years, she found herself thinking about what hadn't happened at the altar and what might have been waiting for her just beyond it. And somewhere in the dark, someone watched her window and made a note in a small, leather-bound ledger. For the next 3 days, Lorelai Bennett kept her shop closed. She told the town's few regulars she was sick. Nothing serious, just a cold. Maplewick was too polite to pry, but behind the drawn curtains of her upstairs apartment, she sat with Wyatt's business card pressed between her fingers, like a splinter she couldn't dislodge. Rowena Maddox. The name haunted her like a whisper just behind the ear. Who was she? A criminal? A liar? A scorned lover? The more Lorelai tried to reason through it, the more absurd the situation became. She should have called the police. She should have told someone. But she didn't. Instead, she did what she'd once sworn never to do again. She searched for Wyatt Granger online. What she found was nothing. Not a trace. His LinkedIn profile had vanished. No social media. No tax records. Even the wedding announcements that once featured their smiling engagement photos had been scrubbed. It was as if someone had intentionally erased him. And then there was the Ashridge Directive. That phrase, so theatrical, so ominous, yielded exactly one meaningful result. A cached half-broken website for a now-defunct nonprofit that claimed to be dedicated to elite humanitarian development through behavioral reconditioning. No contact info. Just one symbol, the black tree with clawed roots, and a board of directors photo, heavily pixelated, faded, but unmistakable. In the background, standing slightly apart from the others, was a woman with flame-red hair and a gaze like shattered glass. Rowena. That night, Lorelai did something reckless. She returned to the note Wyatt left and called the number printed on the back of the card. It rang twice. Then a voice, calm, sharp, British, answered. "You shouldn't be using this number, Ms. Bennett." Lorelai froze. "Who is this?" There was a pause. Then, "You're not ready for answers. But I'll find you when you are." Click. She stood there for a moment, the dial tone humming like static in her ears. Why now? Why, after 7 years of silence, was all of this surfacing? Had Wyatt been telling the truth? Or was this some elaborate manipulation? Was she just a pawn between two dangerous liars? On the 4th night, she reopened the shop. Half to maintain appearances, half to pretend her life hadn't become a slow-burning thriller. She was restocking the poetry shelf when the bell above the door rang. The woman who entered was stunning in the kind of way that unsettled you. Sleek black coat. Leather gloves. Hair a brilliant copper cascade down one shoulder. She didn't browse, she didn't smile, she walked straight up to the counter and said, "I'm looking for Lorelai Bennett." Lorelai froze. "She's unavailable." The woman raised a brow. "That's disappointing. I was hoping she'd be braver than that." She turned to leave, then paused. "Tell her Rowena Maddox sends her regards." Lorelai's legs almost gave out. She barely made it upstairs before locking the door behind her, her heart pounding like it wanted to claw its way out. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. "Now that you've seen me, you deserve the truth. Meet me at the Hollow Bridge tomorrow. Sunset, come alone." No threats, no explanation. Just the signature. R. That night, Wyatt showed up again. She heard him before she saw him. The old floorboard on the back porch creaked in a way only a human could trigger. She met him at the door, blocking it with her body. "You said she was dangerous," Lorelai hissed. "You said she wasn't here. You lied." "I didn't know she'd come this far," he said. "I swear, if she made contact." "She came into my store," Lorelai snapped. "She looked me in the eye, and she wasn't afraid of you, Wyatt. She wasn't afraid of anything." Wyatt's expression darkened. "She's not afraid because she knows what I gave up for you." Lorelai stepped out, closing the door behind her. "Tell me the truth. No more riddles." He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Rowena and I were involved. It started before you and I got engaged. I ended it, but she didn't take it well. What I didn't know was who she really worked for." "You were cheating on me," Lorelai said, her voice shaking. "For how long?" Wyatt looked away. "Almost 2 years." Lorelai staggered back as if struck. He reached for her. She recoiled. "Don't. You don't get to touch me anymore." "I left to keep you out of it," he insisted. "Once I realized how deep the Ashridge Directive ran, I knew they'd come after anyone connected to me. I thought disappearing was the only way to keep you safe." "So you thought letting me believe you were dead, or worse, was protection?" He had no answer, just a shadow in his eyes that told her the guilt was real, but perhaps not the whole story. She held up her phone, showing him the message. "I'm meeting her, tomorrow. Sunset. Alone." "No," Wyatt said immediately. "You can't trust her. She'll twist everything. That's what she does." Lorelai's voice was calm. "Maybe, but I've already trusted one liar for too long." She stepped back into the house and locked the door, this time without flinching. As Wyatt stood there in the dark, alone again, he whispered something only the wind could hear. "She doesn't know what Rowena's capable of." And inside the house, Lorelai stood in her kitchen, hands trembling, because what Wyatt didn't know was that Lorelai had already bought a ticket to leave town the morning after, just in case neither of them made it through sunset. The thin veneer of normalcy Lorelai Bennett had fought so hard to build was starting to crack. It began with the tires. One chilly morning, she stepped outside her apartment to find all 4 wheels of her aging Subaru flattened like pancakes. A single deep scratch carved across the driver's side door. Deliberate, vicious, a signature of anger or warning. No note, no message. Just the unmistakable mark that someone had been there and wanted her to know it. Lorelai's heart hammered, but she forced herself to stay calm. No panicked calls, no rash decisions. She walked the few blocks to her shop, ignoring the eyes of curious neighbors. Maplewick wasn't used to drama, but these small cracks were growing into a fracture that threatened to shatter everything she'd rebuilt. Inside the winter hollow, things were worse. That evening, Lorelai found the front door ajar, an impossible breach in a town where everyone knew everyone. Nothing was stolen. Nothing seemed out of place. But the silence was suffocating. She ran her fingers over the shelves, noting that some books were slightly out of order. A small pile of poetry torn from a journal lay on the floor, as if someone wanted her to find it. But the pages were blank. Just a taunt. Whitman prowled nearby, hissed at shadows no one else could see. When Wyatt showed up that night, soaked and breathless, Lorelai's instinct was to slam the door in his face. Instead, she let him in, though every muscle screamed distrust. "They're watching you," Wyatt said, eyes scanning the room like a soldier in a war zone. Lorelai's voice was icy. "Who?" "The Ashridge Directive. They don't like loose ends," she scoffed. "Loose ends? I'm not part of your twisted game anymore." Wyatt shook his head. "You don't understand. They don't care about what you want. You're a target because of me. Because of what I did." She stared at him, anger mixing with a flicker of old affection. "What did you do, Wyatt? Tell me the whole truth." Before he could answer, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the winter hollow into thick darkness. For a moment, they just stood there. Then a scraping sound, sharp, deliberate, came from the back room. Lorelai's breath caught. "Stay here," Wyatt whispered. She wanted to protest, but before she could, the front door slammed shut with a force that shook the walls. Wyatt cursed under his breath. There inside. In the darkness, Lorelai felt a presence moving around her, too silent to see but impossible to ignore. Then, before she could react, her phone buzzed. A text message. "I see you. No sender, no number." Her blood ran cold. Wyatt moved quickly, pulling a flashlight from his jacket and flicking it on. The beam sliced through the shadows, revealing overturned chairs, scattered papers, and a second message written in smeared red paint on the wall. "Run!" Lorelai's heart thumped in her ears as she turned to Wyatt. "What does this mean? Who did this?" Wyatt's jaw tightened. "It's a warning. They want you scared. They want you running back to them, where they can control you." She swallowed hard. "I'm not running. Not again." Wyatt's eyes searched hers, pleading. "You don't understand what you're up against." Suddenly, a loud crash came from outside. A car peeling away with tires screeching against wet pavement. Lorelai's phone buzzed again. Another text, this time with a photo attachment. It was her. Taken just minutes ago, standing in the doorway of her shop. Someone had been watching her all along. Her hands trembled as Wyatt took the phone and studied the image. "They're closer than I thought," he muttered. Lorelai's mind raced. The man she'd once trusted, who'd vanished without a word, was now her only lifeline. But could she trust him? The next morning brought no relief. At the local diner, whispers floated around. A few strangers had been asking questions about her. Her routine was no longer routine. When she returned home, the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. Every creak in the old building, every gust rattling the windows, felt like a predator's breath on her neck. Wyatt showed up again that evening, bringing more questions than answers. He confessed that the Ashridge Directive had ways to track people, technology far beyond what she could imagine. They monitored phone signals, tapped cameras, even infiltrated local law enforcement. "You have no safe place anymore," he said grimly. "They've sent people to follow you. To make sure you don't disappear like I did." Lorelai clenched her fists, determination replacing fear. "Then I'll find a way to fight back." Wyatt nodded, but his eyes betrayed a darker truth. "They won't stop. Not until they get what they want." As the night deepened, the storm returned, wind howling outside, rain lashing against the windows. Inside the shop, two wounded souls stared across the table, bound by secrets, betrayal, and a threat neither could yet fully face. And somewhere in the shadows, eyes watched. A figure scribbled in a small, leather-bound ledger, the same one Lorelai had glimpsed months before. Every word, every move, every crack in the silence was being recorded. The game had only just begun. Lorelai sat across from Rowena Maddox in a dimly lit diner on the outskirts of Maplewick. The kind of place where conversations were supposed to stay private, but never truly did. The air hung heavy with cigarette smoke and unspoken threats. Rowena's fiery hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, but her sharp green eyes burned like embers. "You want the truth?" Rowena asked, voice low and cold. "You can't handle it." Lorelai clenched her fists under the table, forcing herself to stay calm. "I deserve to know everything." Rowena's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Wyatt wasn't the man you thought he was. Not even close. He was a recruiter." Lorelai blinked, confusion and disbelief swirling together. A recruiter? For the Ashridge Directive. He found vulnerable women like me, and pulled them into the fold. Lorelai's mind reeled. The man who had promised her forever had been manipulating others behind her back all along. Rowena leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I was one of his targets. He charmed me, made me feel special, important. Then he handed me over. I was bait, Lorelai, a lure for others in despair. The Directive's soft entry." Lorelai's breath hitched. "Why tell me this now? Because I'm done being their pawn." Rowena's eyes darkened. "Because Wyatt is more dangerous than you realize, and because if you don't listen, you'll end up like the others." Before Lorelai could ask who the others were, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Another anonymous text. "Trust no one, especially him." Her heart sank. Wyatt wasn't just lying about the affair, he'd been playing a far more sinister game. Later that night, Lorelai confronted Wyatt in the small apartment she'd barely begun to feel safe in. "Rowena said you used her. That you recruited women for that cult." Lorelai said, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and hurt. Wyatt's face darkened, but he didn't deny it. I did what I had to, he said quietly. It's complicated. It's monstrous, she shot back. You destroyed people's lives. Wyatt looked away, guilt etched deep in his features. I tried to get out, but the directive doesn't let go easily. How many women? Lorelai demanded. How many lives did you ruin? Wyatt hesitated, then whispered, More than I can count. The weight of his confession pressed down on Lorelai like a physical blow. But even as the pieces fell into place, a new question gnawed at her. If Wyatt was part of the Ashridge Directive all along, why had he disappeared? Why had he left her with no explanation, no goodbye? Before Wyatt could answer, Lorelai's phone buzzed again. A new message. This time, a video. Her hands shook as she played it. The footage was grainy and dark. A woman, bound and gagged, struggled against her captors. Then the camera shifted, and Lorelai recognized the setting. The Ashridge Directive's symbol was painted on the wall, and the woman's eyes were wide with terror and heartbreak. Rowena. The message was clear. Rowena was still trapped, and so was Lorelai. Wyatt's face turned pale. They're punishing her for talking to you. Lorelai's mind raced. She needed to act, and fast. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a target. And the lines between friend and foe were now impossibly blurred. Lorelai sat frozen on her worn armchair, the envelope trembling in her hands. The Ashridge Directive's insignia, an intricate black phoenix clutching a broken chain, was stamped on the creamy paper like a shadow of doom. She hadn't touched it since pulling it from the mailbox just hours ago, but the weight of what might be inside was unbearable. She finally tore it open, revealing a single photograph. At first, it looked like any ordinary snapshot, her standing outside the winter hollow, arms crossed, eyes wary. But the date on the back sent a shock straight through her chest. 3 years ago. 3 years. How could they have known where she was back then? Who had been watching her? And why? Lorelai's mind reeled, the strands of her carefully constructed life unraveling at the seams. She rifled through the apartment, looking for any sign that she had been watched before. That's when she found it. The small black device tucked inside the hollowed space behind the baseboard of her bedroom wall. A recording device, silent but lethal in its implication. A chill spread through her as she realized every whispered conversation, every solitary moment, every phone call might have been captured, cataloged, and used against her. She stared at it as if it might speak. Suddenly, a soft knock at the door jolted her. She froze. Her pulse thundered as she peeked through the peephole. No one. But as she stepped back, the shadows in the hallway seemed to shift. Someone was watching. Always watching. Wyatt arrived minutes later, concern etched deep in his face. They're more relentless than I thought, he said grimly. Lorelai showed him the photograph and the recorder. He swallowed hard, a rare crack in his confident facade. They've been surveilling you for years, longer than I ever imagined. How? She asked. Why didn't you tell me? Wyatt looked away. I was trying to protect you, from them and from me. Before she could demand more, Wyatt's phone buzzed. A text popped up. Stop digging, Lorelai. You're in deeper than you know. Lorelai's fingers tightened around the phone. Whoever was sending these messages was close. Too close. She knew she couldn't run anymore. But what she didn't know was how deep the rabbit hole went. That night, Lorelai started listening to the recordings from the device. At first, it was mostly mundane, her voice on the phone with suppliers, quiet conversations with neighbors. Then, in the middle of the static, a faint whisper. A voice she didn't recognize. The girl from Vermont. She's the key. Her heart skipped a beat. Who was talking about her? And what key? The next day, Lorelai went back to the bookstore and found a stranger waiting inside. A woman, mid-30s, dressed sharply but nervously. "I'm Emily," she said softly. "I was sent to help you." Lorelai eyed her skeptically. "Who sent you?" Emily glanced around, voice barely above a whisper. "Someone who wants to see the Ashridge Directive fall." For a moment, Lorelai considered turning her away. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. But desperation won over. Emily revealed she'd once been part of the Directive's network, a coder who helped build their surveillance systems before breaking away and going underground. "They monitor everything," Emily said, "every phone, every camera, every conversation. I helped design their blind spots, and I can help you disappear in plain sight." Lorelai felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. But before they could plan their next move, Lorelai's phone buzzed again. A video message. This time it showed a dimly lit room. Walls covered with photos, newspaper clippings, and maps. At the center, a large board with strings connecting names, places, and dates. And pinned to the board was a photo of Lorelai's mother. Wyatt's face went pale. "Where did you get that?" Lorelai didn't answer. Because suddenly, everything changed. Her family, the past she'd buried, was tangled in the very conspiracy hunting her now. The Ashridge Directive wasn't just an external threat. It was in her blood. The rain beat down on Maplewick like a warning. Lorelai sat at her kitchen table, eyes fixed on the photograph of her mother pinned to the Directive's conspiracy board. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She had questions, more than ever, but the silence inside her apartment felt suffocating. Wyatt sat across from her, drenched from the storm. His hands trembled as he finally broke the silence. "There's something you don't know," he murmured, eyes locked on the photograph. "I left the Directive, but not before I swore the oath." Lorelai stiffened. "The oath?" Wyatt nodded slowly. "Every operative has to take it. It's a blood-binding vow, symbolic but deadly serious. Once you're in, you're theirs. Mind, body, past. The only way out is through death or exposure. I took the oath to protect you, but I stayed too long." She didn't know whether to believe him. Every word from his mouth felt like a knife with a slippery handle. Sometimes truth, sometimes threat. "And Rowena?" she asked. "What did you swear to her?" Wyatt's jaw clenched. "Rowena was dangerous long before I recruited her. She was never just bait. She was the Directive's inside storm. Unstable, brilliant, and absolutely loyal. Until she turned. I left because I couldn't watch what she was becoming." "And the disappearances?" Lorelai pressed. "The women who vanished across the country?" He didn't speak at first. Then, "They were failed tests. Women who didn't pass the psychological thresholds for recruitment. The Directive doesn't let mistakes live." Lorelai's stomach turned. "So you just watched them die?" she whispered. "I tried to help some," he said. "That's why they turned on me. That's why I ran. Why I left you." She didn't know whether to scream or collapse. Just then, her phone buzzed with a new message from Rowena. "Meet me tonight. I have proof he's lying. Come alone." Attached was a photograph. Wyatt in a dark room, standing over a bound woman. Lorelai recognized the woman immediately. It was Emily, the ex-coder who had offered to help her vanish. She didn't remember agreeing to meet Rowena, but her feet were already moving. She found Rowena in an abandoned church just outside town. The pews had rotted away, and shards of colored glass littered the floor like broken promises. Rowena stood near the altar, holding a flash drive in one hand and a revolver in the other. "I didn't kill her," she said before Lorelai could ask. "But he will. He's silencing everyone who helped you." Lorelai didn't want to believe it, but the fear in her gut said otherwise. Rowena tossed her the flash drive. "Everything's on there. Every name, every disappearance, every ceremony, including the oath. You'll find your mother's name too." Lorelai's breath caught. "What does my mother have to do with any of this?" Rowena tilted her head, watching her like a cat watches a cornered mouse. "Did he ever tell you how she died?" Rowena asked. "She drowned. Car accident. Police said—" "Your mother was Ashridge's first successful defector," Rowena said. "She helped dozens escape the network until they caught her." Lorelai backed away. "No. She's the reason they watched you. You're not just some random link in Wyatt's past, Lorelai. Your legacy." Everything twisted. Her whole life, the hollow grief, the whispered family secrets, the strange men at her mother's funeral. It wasn't coincidence. It was conditioning. Back at her apartment, Lorelai plugged in the flash drive. Rowena wasn't lying. There were files. Dozens. Names of women Wyatt had helped recruit, video footage of him initiating them, and encrypted ledgers signed with initials, LB, her mother. Wyatt walked in while she was still watching. His expression darkened when he saw what she was holding. "She got to you," he said flatly. "She told me the truth." "She gave you her truth," he snapped. "What she didn't tell you is that she took over the directive after I left. She's not the victim anymore, she's the architect." Lorelai froze. "Then what am I?" she asked. Wyatt took a step closer, his voice low. "The heir." Her knees nearly gave out, he continued. "They've been grooming you for years, watching you. Your store, your habits, your relationships. They want you to lead what your mother started." Lorelai felt sick. "Why would you come back?" "Because I thought I could stop it," he said. "But maybe I was wrong." She stared at him, trying to separate the man she once loved from the monster before her. Then she made her choice. "Get out!" Wyatt opened his mouth, but Lorelai had already pulled the flash drive from the computer and backed toward the door. She was done trusting liars. Whether Rowena was telling the truth or not, Lorelai knew one thing. The next move had to be hers, and she would burn the whole directive to the ground if it meant reclaiming the pieces of herself they had stolen. The last time Lorelai Bennett wore high heels, she was walking down the aisle toward a future that never came. Tonight, she strapped them on to walk into the belly of a beast. The Ashridge Directive wasn't just a syndicate. It was a theater of illusions, and if she was going to destroy it, she'd need to become part of the act. She and Rowena had spent the past 48 hours constructing new identities, backstories, layered with just enough pain and desperation to be believable bait. Rowena's contacts fed them a time and place, a recruitment masquerade hidden inside a decaying estate on the edge of New Hampshire. The invitation came with no address, only GPS coordinates and a warning: leave your past behind. When they arrived at the estate, Lorelai felt the weight of the moment. The smell of rotting wallpaper and expensive perfume mingled in the air. Dozens of women wandered the halls in black lace masks, champagne in hand, laughter curling into lies. It was a circus of broken souls, dressed up to forget they were prey. "This is what it always was," Rowena murmured beside her. "Seduction and surveillance. Don't look too curious. Look useful." As they descended a staircase lined with flickering candles, Lorelai spotted him. Wyatt. He wasn't wearing a mask. He didn't need one. He was speaking with a woman in a red velvet dress, tall, elegant, and holding a silver cane. Her face was turned slightly away, but Lorelai caught a glimpse of her eyes. They were pale, cloudy, and unblinking. Rowena whispered, "That's Vivienne Cross. She replaced me after I went rogue. If she recognizes me, we're dead." Lorelai's pulse surged. "What's Wyatt doing here?" Rowena's jaw tightened. "I told you he disappeared after giving you that flash drive. This is his audition to get back in." Lorelai felt the floor shift under her. They split up. Rowena vanished into the crowd. Lorelai made her way toward the upstairs study where Rowena claimed they could find an internal terminal, one that would hold personnel records, recruitment histories, and possibly a list of high-ranking associates. The study was empty at first. Then came a voice from the shadows. "I knew you'd follow the breadcrumbs," Wyatt said. Lorelai turned slowly, fingers instinctively tightening on the flash drive in her pocket. "You led me here?" Wyatt stepped into the candlelight, his face unreadable. You wanted answers. You deserve them. But you also need to see the bigger picture. You're not just hunting ghosts. You're standing in the house they built for you. He stepped aside, revealing a large painting on the wall. An oil portrait of Lorelai's mother, younger, regal, and unmistakably present. She wore the directive's insignia on a pendant around her neck. Underneath it, a plaque read, Founder's Circle, L.B. Hale. Lorelai recoiled. This can't be real. She didn't just defect, Wyatt said quietly. She was one of the architects. She had a vision, to uplift damaged women, give them agency. But the men twisted it. She tried to stop them. She paid for it. Lorelai blinked hard. Then why try to bring me into this? Because it's yours, he said. By blood, by inheritance. But more than that, you could finish what she started. A sudden crash echoed downstairs, then shouting. Wyatt grabbed Lorelai's hand. Rowena's made her move. You need to go, now. Lorelai yanked away. No more running. She bolted into the hallway, past startled operatives, past crumbling wallpaper, and half-whispered warnings. Smoke began curling through the vents. Somewhere, fire alarms blared. She found Rowena in the server room, frantically copying files onto a hard drive. Did you know about the Founder's Circle? Lorelai demanded. Rowena paused. I knew she was someone important. I didn't know she was your mother. Lorelai stared at her. What's your endgame? Rowena didn't answer. Instead, she handed over a burner phone and a sealed envelope. If I don't make it out, Rowena said, take this to a woman named Eleanor Wren in D.C. She's ex-directive. She'll help you finish what I started. Just then, an explosion rocked the floor beneath them. Wyatt appeared in the doorway, a trail of blood down his temple. They're sealing the exits. We have maybe 2 minutes. They fled together into the chaos. Outside, police sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had tipped them off. Lorelai didn't know who. She didn't care. She had the drive. She had the phone. And she had the ring Wyatt dropped at her feet just before disappearing into the smoke. It was her mother's ring. But it was covered in blood. Lorelai looked around. Rowena was gone. Wyatt was gone. And in the silence of the woods she realized they had all used her in different ways. She was done being someone else's leverage. Tomorrow she would decrypt the drive, she would contact Eleanor Wren. And if there was a way to dismantle the Ashridge Directive from the roots, she would find it. Because, for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a victim. She felt like the storm. For hours, Lorelai Bennett sat in the dark, the only light coming from her laptop screen. The flash drive trembled in the USB port, as if it too feared what was inside. The files were fragmented. Video clips, redacted dossiers, and coded transcripts that made no immediate sense. But as she decrypted more, a picture began to form. It wasn't just about Wyatt, or Rowena, or even her mother. It was about legacy. The Ashridge Directive wasn't built on ideology, it was built on lineage. A network of powerful families seeded into institutions across the country: law enforcement, finance, politics. And at the center of it all was the Matriarch Protocol, a generational project to raise, mold, and weaponize women from birth. Lorelai's name appeared in one of the files. Project, Calyx Subject, LB02 Origin. Hale lineage status, withdrawn at age 9. False death protocol. She stared at it, shaking. They hadn't just killed her mother, they'd faked Lorelai's own death and planted her in a safe civilian family. The Bennetts weren't her biological parents. They were protectors, strategically chosen to raise her off-grid until she could be activated or eliminated. And Wyatt? He'd been sent years later, not as a lover, but as a handler. Lorelai's stomach churned. A knock came at the door. She froze. For a breathless moment, she thought, Rowena or Wyatt. But when she looked through the peephole, it was neither. A woman stood there, gray hair in a sharp bun, pearl earrings, eyes that flicked too fast to be casual. Miss Bennett? she called softly. "We need to talk. My name is Eleanor Wren." Lorelai let her in, pulse thundering. Eleanor carried herself like a surgeon, efficient, precise, deeply aware of what to cut and when. "I used to run operations for Ashridge," she said. "Your mother and I were close, until she started asking too many questions." "You mean, before she died?" Lorelai asked. Eleanor gave a rueful smile. "Lorelai, your mother isn't dead." The world slipped sideways. She staged her death using directive resources. The body in that hospital morgue was a swap. She went underground after learning they'd begun testing on children, specifically you. Lorelai stumbled back. "You expect me to believe she's been alive all this time?" Eleanor handed her a flash drive. "She's been protecting you. And watching. She knew you'd eventually come looking." The flash drive contained one file. A video. Recorded in grainy black and white. Her mother, older, weary, staring into the camera. "If you're watching this, they failed to stop you." "Good. I couldn't keep you out forever, but I could delay them. I didn't want this for you. But now that you've found the truth, you have to burn it down. Every file. Every vault. Start with Ashridge. Finish with their donors. I left everything with Eleanor, including the names. You are not their tool. You are my daughter, and you are the last gate." The screen went black. Lorelai pressed her hands to her face. Everything she thought she knew, her past, her pain, even her healing, was wrapped in a bigger lie. Wyatt had disappeared again. Rowena had vanished, but Eleanor gave her a location. A summit of high-level directive investors was taking place at an estate outside Richmond in 48 hours. With the files Lorelai held, she could expose them all. 2 days later, Lorelai walked into the heart of the fire. She posed as an investor. Eleanor had forged the credentials and entered the Gilded Lion's Den. Surveillance was tight. Every room was wired. But Eleanor had a plan. A signal embedded in Lorelai's phone would trigger a public data drop of the directive's files to major news outlets. All she had to do was survive long enough to press send. She made it as far as the main ballroom before the first familiar face emerged from the crowd. Rowena. Her face was bruised, her arm in a sling. "You don't know who's really pulling strings," she said softly. "Eleanor's not clean either. She's part of a splinter group trying to rebuild the directive in her image." Before Lorelai could speak, the lights cut out. Alarms blared. Panic erupted. Wyatt appeared beside her in the chaos. "Come with me if you want to live," he said, half joking, half serious. But Lorelai had had enough of being dragged by other people's schemes. She sprinted to the control room, Eleanor's beacon glowing on her phone screen. She reached the panel, breath ragged, heart pounding. She hit send. The room lit up with the red pulse of a mass data breach. The directive's secrets, financiers, operatives, inner circles, were now public. Everything fell apart in real time. Screams, sirens, the sound of an empire unraveling. Lorelai slipped out through a back corridor and collapsed against the cold bricks of an alley. Blood on her hands, some of it hers, some of it not. As she caught her breath, another knock echoed behind her. A figure stepped into view. Not Wyatt, not Rowena, not Eleanor. Her mother, older, hardened, real. "Hello, Lorelai," she said, voice shaking. "It's time to go home."